Around 1976, the Safe Drinking Water Act passed a material specification requiring that all components who come in contact with public drinking water contain not more than the 8% lead. If these components were manufactured meeting that spec, these components were considered lead-free at that time. AWWA, which is American Water Works Association spec, C800, had a little tighter spec than the Safe Drinking Water Act. AWWA, which governs all the brass manufacturers, required that they meet an 85-555 spec, which is to say that all their brass, service line brass, should be made of 85% copper, 5% tin, 5% lead, and 5% zinc. Now obviously most of the material was the copper, but the 5% tin they added to give the material or the formula tensile. The 5% lead made it a little softer, a little more malleable, and this 5% zinc actually provided what I like to call the glue to the whole formula and held everything together. Today there is an amended Safe Drinking Water Act standard for performance. You notice the first standard was for material. Today's standard is for performance. Basically, the National Primary Drinking Water regulations require that any material come in contact with public drinking water not contain more than 15 parts per billion of lead, which is 15 micrograms per liter. This was based on water samples taken at the tap. In an effort to meet both the material and the performance spec, there is an ANSI, American National Standards Institute, NSF/NSF regulation known as NSF 61. NSF 61 is increasingly becoming the acceptable standard for the industry. NSF 61 requires not only that the material meet that 8% minimum lead standard, but also 15 parts per billion standard as well. Most all brass manufacturers meet NSF 61 in the smaller sizes. That's up to 1 inch. And the reason for that is that fittings up to 1 inch have smaller surface areas. They're smaller fittings, smaller surface areas. The larger fittings, 1.5 and 2, because of their larger surface area, attract more leaching of the lead onto the surface and therefore have to be treated with a special process. This special process that Ford uses is called the Kunkel process, and it does not use acetates, as a lot of people believe. It is a chemical wash process. Once these fittings have been treated with the Kunkel process, then they are submitted to Underwriters Laboratories for testing. Underwriters tests, evaluates, and certifies that those larger fittings, 1.5 and 2 inch, are meeting the required NSF 61 standard. This approach that Ford takes is a lot more comprehensive than some companies that offer a compliant product. When a company offers a compliant product, basically they're saying that they think or they may meet the spirit of the standard, but they have not been sent out to independent labs for testing and certification. So we have to be careful with that. If we're competing against somebody that's just offering a compliant product, we're not talking apples to apples or oranges to oranges. It's two totally different processes and two totally different products. How do we know that we are receiving NSF 61 product? There are a couple of different ways to tell. First of all, if we are receiving an NSF 61 product, which we are in all sizes up to 1 inch, remember that, up to 1 inch, we're okay. All the packaging will contain the LXI logo on the corner and the Underwriters Laboratory seal of approval. Now, just a little note on the LXI, for those of you not familiar with that, it's a logo that Ford chose only because it really states the standard. Actually, it's Roman numerals. If you L meaning 50, X 10, and 1 is 61. So it's NSF 61, just for your information. All of our fittings up to 1 inch should have the LXI logo and the Underwriters Lab seal of approval on them. That's how we know we're meeting NSF 61. If one of your customers requires NSF 61 in the larger sizes, be very careful that you call and check with customer service or with the supplier, because both these processes will take time. You may have a longer lead time to manufacture and therefore a longer lead time for delivery. So be very, very careful, and there is a cost difference. In actuality, lead-free formulas for brass fittings or copper fittings has been around for a long, long time. Companies have looked at them, but they have found several problems with them. Number one, it is almost cost prohibitive to manufacture. Number two, they have found inconsistency in the product from lot to lot. Number three, they also do not feel that the manufacturer of these products and sitting on the field, that actual installation is the right testing ground for them. They feel that they should be tested beforehand and approved so that they know exactly what you are putting in the ground or we are putting in the ground. Ford also tested several chemical processes trying to make their fitting meet NSF 61, the 1.5 and 2 inch. And so they actually partnered with a research firm to create their own system, which they call the Kunkel process. The Kunkel process, by the way, is named after a Dave Kunkel, who was the foundry manager and a vice president and an overall nice guy at Ford Meter Box for many, many years. One can hardly talk about NSF 61 without mentioning California Proposition 65. Proposition 65 is actually an action taken by an advocacy group who filed notice to all the brass manufacturers who were not only manufacturing but selling Waterworks brass into California. Basically, they put them on notice that all this brass coming in contact with public drinking water should not have any lead whatsoever, totally lead-free. That's still kind of up in the courts, and no decision has been made. But from time to time, you will be asked about Proposition 65. But only the city of LA and another small district are the only two requiring it. If requested, our meters also come in contact with public drinking water. So from time to time, you may get a request for lead-free meter bodies. We can supply those. Right now, they're currently available from Master Meter all the way up through 2 inch. They can supply those in a Cibaloy alloy, which is a lead-free brass. Meters from 2 inch and above in size will very shortly be approved, so we'll be able to offer a full line of lead-free brass when requested. There is no doubt in my mind that we in the U.S. have the safest and most reliable water systems in the world, and our suppliers are helping us maintain that quality and that standard.